Welcome to Sales and Marketing Talk Show. Today I have Cian joining me, and we are talking about sales and more specifically about why you are either winning your cases or losing your cases. And I think this is really a subject that is super interesting to many salespeople. At least I'm waiting a lot from this conversation and hopefully learning new things. So welcome on the show.
Thank you, Sami. Good to be here.
And the first question that I always love to hear from people is kind of the reason why and why you are interested in this topic. I think, like, for me as salespeople, I'm always asking this question from me and my team members and so on. But why did you got super interested on this topic specifically?
So the first 10 years of my career I spent in tech sales, so working for large global companies, Cognos, SAP, those kind of organizations. Sales cycles were, quite long, sometimes a couple of months, sometimes 6-9 months. We'd spend huge amounts of time and energy putting together tender responses and bids and proposals and demos, and doing all the work that salespeople do. And that was fine. But what I found really frustrating was that we would, sometimes we would win a deal, sometimes we'd lose, but we never really understood exactly what had influenced the customer to say yes or to say no. So what we did instead was, as a sales team, we sat down internally and we had a conversation. We said, why do you think we won that one? And someone would say, oh, look, I think we won because we were the most cost effective. And someone else would say, I think we won because we did a really, really good demo. And someone else might say, well, I think we had a good relationship with the CFO. And so we'd sort of say, okay, well, there's our 3 reasons. And then that would become the default understanding for what had happened on that deal. And we'd move on to the next one. But the reality is we had no clue why we'd won that deal. We just made some assumptions and kind of moved on. And it just struck me as crazy. And we were doing the same thing when we were losing deals. We'd have an internal conversation. We might have spent 6 months. We might have spent, $100,000 pursuing a $5 million deal, and we'd walk away with nothing. And it just seemed crazy. I've played sport all my life. And if you're a professional athlete, what you do is you watch the game tape back. What did I do well? What did I do badly? How did my competitor, beat me in this particular situation? And then you learn from it and you find ways to improve. If we call ourselves sales professionals, my philosophy is you get the sales bit for free, but the professional bit you actually have to earn. And so as a way to earn that professionalism, we need to be watching the game tape back. We need to be analyzing, why are we winning? Why are we losing? Or sometimes it's a no decision outcome. And what can we do to improve? And so I didn't know the answer, but I understood the question. And so I started exploring that while I was still employed in the corporate world. I was saying, guys, how do other companies do this? What should we do? And I wasn't getting any really good answers. So I did something really simple and probably a bit stupid. I started to reach out to customers and said, hey, can I come in and just spend an hour with you and kind of walk through the buying process you went through and just ask you some questions about what did we do well? What did we do badly? Where could we improve? What did you like about our competition? Where did we stand out from the crowd? Where did we fall behind? Just, quite simple, quite basic questions like that. And then 2 really surprising things happened. Firstly, customers agreed to be interviewed and to have those conversations. And secondly, the stuff they were telling me was completely separate and different to what we were thinking ourselves. So they'd say, well, it was this, this, this. And we were like, really? Because we didn't know about any of that. We thought it was this, this. And so all of a sudden I had this realization that as an industry, we've been missing out this incredibly important step in all of our sales cycles, which is whether we win or we lose or we draw, we need to analyze what's happened so we can get better. And that was kind of where it all came about.
Yeah, some great ideas there. And what do you think, like, now, if we think about, like, I think many sales organizations, they are thinking at least like internal, like why we win cases or why we lose cases. But what do you think, for example, if we go and ask 10 sales leaders that, hey, what is the real reason why you are winning or losing cases right now? Can they really answer the question, like, honestly?
No, they can't. They can't.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact because I have that conversation with sales leaders every day of the week. And because that's the world I've come from, I ask them really honestly, can you honestly tell me why you're winning and losing? And sometimes some of them will say, well, it's this and it's this. And I'll say, how do you know? And they'll say, well, yeah, okay, we don't really know. That's what we suspect. or that's what we believe, or that's what our research tells us. But unless you can say, we've spoken to our customers and this is what they've told us, then you don't know for sure. You just have a theory about what's actually happened. But most sales leaders are actually pretty honest, and they're like, yeah, we don't know. We don't know. So that's the challenge. The challenge is, and my philosophy is really quite simple. It's, if you're a salesperson and you've done a good job, you've actually earned the right to get this feedback. But most of the time, we don't know how to capture it. So what happens is one of two things. Either we don't do any post-sales debrief with the customer, or we try and do it ourselves as the salesperson or as the sales leader. And that puts the customer in a really awkward position, because I come to you, Sammy, and I say, hey, listen, you decided not to go with us. You decided to go with our competitors. I really want to understand why. And so you feel a little bit awkward because some of the feedback you need to give me is about me, and I didn't do a good job, or about my boss. So that puts you in an awkward position straight away. But then even if you do give me that feedback, internally, I'm now in a difficult position, because I have to either take that feedback myself, or tell my boss they did something wrong, or go and talk to my colleagues internally and say, well, actually, we lost that deal because of you and your terrible tender response, or because our legal team. So it puts everyone in a slightly awkward position. And that's one of the reasons that so many businesses just don't do this. They just let it go through, and then they go ahead and make the same mistakes the next time around. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, of course, if you talk like internally about things, you can build some kind of like hypothesis of, hey, this might be the reason. But of course, you always should be talking with the client. But one thing that I've noticed, like, because I really love to talk with the clients, is like when you ask them, like, hey, why did we lose this case, or why did we win this case? They are answering the question, but most likely you are not getting all the information, so it needs a little bit digging. As you mentioned, there might be some like hard things to tell, and for example, if I'm asking and the customer has something bad to say about me, it might be super hard to say it directly to me. Correct. So what are the best tactics or practicalities that you can do really to dig deep, really to get to the beef?
So there's a couple of things you can do. I think the first thing you need to do is ask before they've made their decision. So let them know, look, whether you pick us or not, we'd really like to get some feedback from you, because we find that direct feedback from our customers at the end of the sales cycle is the best source of insight for us in terms of training our people, improving our demos, improving our commercials or our bid. So set the expectation early, so they're not surprised when you ask. Let them know what you're going to use the information for and what you're not going to use the information for. Because one of the big fears that customers have is that you're going to say there was something wrong with their procurement process, or that they were biased, or that they were already leaning. So they're actually worried that you're going to, try and maybe cause trouble in the way they made their procurement process, or that you're going to cause trouble for the salesperson. You're going to blame the salesperson and push them under the bus because they lost the deal. So you have to explain to them what you're going to use the information for and what you're not going to use the information for. But assuming you've done that, then really you've got two options. You either use an independent third party that gives you complete separation, so the customer can feel really comfortable talking about their feedback, or you find an independent person inside your own organization. So we talked earlier, Sammy, about sales and marketing and bringing those two closer together. It could be someone who runs marketing, or it could be someone who runs value engineering, or it could be someone, depending on the size of your organization. But ideally, it needs to be somebody who wasn't directly involved in the sales cycle, so the customer feels more comfortable giving that feedback, but also so that individual can do something with it. Because a lot of the time when we conduct these reviews now for companies all over the world, very, very large companies bring us in and say, hey, can you interview these 3 or 4 people for us and find out what actually happened, and then kind of crunch all that data and come back to us and tell us, A, what happened, but B, what we should do differently. And we're in a much better position because there's none of the politics, there's none of the sort of professional agenda. So we can come in and we can say, this is what they told us, this is where the issues are, this is what you need to go away and fix. If you're internal in an organization, sometimes that's a bit harder to do because of just the nature of people working with other people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great idea to like do it in different levels. So there is like, you can be asking that question from the client, and I think you should be. But then when there's a third party, I think it's even even better. And for example, what I typically do is, for example, when selling like bigger services and then going through the offer with the client, actually most of the time the client won't be making the decision at that point. If it's like big deal, they are like, hey, we are taking this to our management team and we are discussing that one, and then we are having the decision in 1 week. At that time, like when going through the offer, I always ask, hey, can we have a short call after the meeting? And then basically what I say that if you decide to work with us, we can agree on the next steps over there, and it would be great to hear like why did you choose us. And if you choose to go with our competitor, I would love to hear like why you decided to go with that one, what we can learn from there. So I think that's the way that I do it, and I think it's super easy, and at the same time it saves my time, because I don't need to be doing the following up, trying to call, trying to get the decision when you have that one on the calendar.
And do they tell you things that surprise you when you have those conversations, Sammy? Do they share stuff that kind of you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that?
Yeah, I would say that they are surprising things, but then at the same time, even though I would say I'm good at asking hard questions from them, digging some information, but at the same time, I always have the feeling that I'm not getting like all the information. So that's why, for example, what I personally do, I quite often use our CEO and ask her to call the clients and ask from them. And that's actually the same that I do for my sales team. When they are having meetings every now and then, I'm calling those potential clients and like asking them how did the sales process went, what we can learn
That's a
from
good
there.
strategy. Yeah, that's a really good strategy. I think, we've been doing this for more than 10 years now for companies. And the biggest surprise for me through this whole process, I thought that our product and our price were going to be absolutely critical in every buying decision that ever gets made. But what I discovered was that our product and our price are really important at getting us from the long list to the short list. So if they're looking at 10 vendors, absolutely, do you tick the product box? But once you've got to that short list, then product and price get put to one side. And now they're looking at things like cultural fit, the quality of your team, who else you've worked with that they know, how you're going to manage and mitigate their risk factors, what the purpose of your organization is, all of these other things which are more kind of almost like soft skills as distinct from emotional intelligence rather than intellectual.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered is that as an industry, we're not very good at selling to people's hearts. We're very good at selling to their heads, but we're not very good at selling to their hearts. But I've realized that actually most customers are buying with their heads and their hearts. They're buying your product and your price, but they're also buying your people and your purpose. But if you don't know how to articulate the value of your people and your purpose, you're actually going to fall behind in a big way.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that one. And like one of the favorite things for me to do within the sales process is always do something fun or something that cheers up the client, like really speaking to the heart directly. And because I think like really people are doing decisions based on the feeling as well. So I think it's like super important for how to work on that one.
Yeah.
But when we are talking about like analyzing winning and losing, I would say typically that happens like in the end of the sales case. And of course, you can use that information for the future sales case, but can you somehow already utilize the win and lose analysis like when you still are in the sales case, so you can kind of affect that particular sales case? Have you done like some customer cases like that one?
Yeah, we have. Look, it's funny you asked that question because we get asked that all the time. Because every sales leader immediately goes, "This is good, but if it can help me win deals I'm working on right now, it's even better." So there's a couple of things you can do. You're right. So the first thing is, if you analyze why you're winning a deal, why you've won a deal, and there's certain key learnings there, you can immediately take those and apply them to other deals that are live. So you can apply that learning straight away. But what we are seeing as more and more SaaS companies are emerging, what they're trying to do is not just win deals, but they're trying to reduce churn. They're trying to increase mind share and wallet share with their existing customers. So one of the things we're being asked to do more and more now is not win-loss reviews, but value realization reviews, where we talk to existing customers. Effectively, we say, "Hey, how's it going? You've been a customer for a couple of years with this organization. What's working? What's not? What do you love? What frustrates you? What could we improve upon, et cetera, et cetera?" And so this isn't a customer satisfaction survey. This is like a really in-depth interview where you're talking about, their frustrations and the stuff they love and what's made them loyal and again, then when you find this stuff out, you can improve the relationship with that particular customer. So they're going to be stickier and they're going to be less likely to churn. But you can immediately pick up these learnings and apply them right across the business, because there's a lot of similarity in terms of the frustrations that customers have, but also the things that they love. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, because that is typically something that we do with our clients. Like when we start to do marketing with them, we do those kind of like deep interviews, and you really get like a lot of valuable information from there that you can utilize in your marketing, but in your sales, in your customer success, in basically all parts of your business.
And it really depends on what you're asking them. I think that's the critical thing, because people say to us, like, is this only going to benefit us in sales? And my response is, depending on the questions you ask, it can benefit you right the way through the sales chain. So if you ask questions about how easy was it to find us when you started researching, and what was the quality of our marketing content, and did we gate our content, or did we make it easy for you to access it, and how did that compare to our competition, and then what about our initial conversations and discovery, and what about our bid, right the way through, and how easy was it to buy from us, the commercials, the legals. Depending on the questions you ask, that will elicit different feedback. But if you're smart, you'll kind of ask questions that mirror their buying cycle, so you get a little bit of value at each step of the journey, and then you can feed that out into the different parts of your business, and everyone gets the benefit of it. So yeah, it's on the one hand, it's very, very simple, but on the flip side, it's incredibly powerful, because it's very rare that we get this. So when we do these interviews and we feed it back to senior leaders, and quite often, the reports go to the CEO and even the board, and they're reading in the words of customers why they made a $20 million decision not to buy from you. Everybody's sitting on the front of their seat, and we record these interviews as well, because the customers give it, so you can sit down and listen back. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's really, really interesting. I think we need to bring the voice of our customers into our organizations much, much more than we do, because when we do that, all of the internal noise and discussion goes away, and we just sit and listen and then react and respond based on what they're telling us.
Yeah, that's true. For example, yeah, if I think someone from my sales team is telling me that, hey, this is the reason why we lose the case, and then I disagree with that one, I think I can disagree with that one, or I can agree with that one, but if you hear it from customer point of view, then it's like that's the case. That is the reason why we won or lose the case. So I think that's a great example.
That's quite interesting, Sammy. When, let's say, for example, you're a global business, and in one area of the world you're struggling against a particular competitor, and you talk to 10 customers, and they give you very similar feedback. Now you see trends, and you can go back to head office and say, look, we need to change our strategy here because it's not working. And it's not that we don't think it's working. This is what our customers are telling you. And invariably, head office will say, okay, that's fine. You go and do what you need to do. But if you say we need to change our strategy, but you don't have that, data or qualitative data to back it up, usually they'll say you're just not doing a good job. We're gonna change out the team, whereas actually the strategy might have been flawed. So we actually see sales leaders weaponizing the customer feedback they get to then make specific changes inside the business to then, obviously be more successful.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, then now I've been interviewing my clients. I have a lot of like feedback from there. Maybe then like how to take that one into action. And I think we have the win case and lose case, and we could start with like the case that you have been winning, and you will learn like why you win, like how to scale that one to action. Can you share some like real life example that, hey, this was a reason why client won, and this is how we made that one to scale in the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I mentioned was that the quality of your people tends to really resonate with customers, but quite often vendors don't necessarily focus on that. So they talk about the resources they're going to put into a bid, but they don't name those people. They don't introduce those people into the sales cycle. They don't build up their credibility and their knowledge internally. So we've worked with companies where the end customer said, Sammy was amazing. We really, really liked him. We trusted him. He was very credible. And once we knew he was going to be involved in the project delivery, everybody said we want to work with that particular organization. So then what that does is the vendor says, okay, we need to better position our people, and we need to position them as a integral part of the sales engagement, rather than just 5 resources that are going to be part of your consulting team. So we've seen companies do that really, really smartly and start to apply their people as a point of differentiation rather than just their product. We've also got plenty of other examples where companies were giving away margin in deals because their sales team were discounting. But as we spoke to the customers, we realized they didn't need to discount because the customers loved them. They were head and shoulders better than their competition. But because they had this philosophy of discounting, they were just discounting anyway without even being asked to. So, once that got fed back up to head office, they were like, okay, we need to change our approach. We're going to remove the discounting conversation, and instead we're going to put more value in at the front end. And they didn't see any sales dropping, but what they saw was their margins increased significantly. So I think it's really simple. It's take the learnings and then try and apply them across the business. Try and bring the whole business up, because at the moment, for most companies, we win a deal and we ring the bell and somebody gets clapped on the back and everyone's happy, but we don't know why. So that doesn't help us in any future deals. It doesn't even help that individual necessarily win future deals because they're not sure why either. So we need to extract the 4 or 5 key things that really influence the customer, and we need to share that across the business so everyone gets it and they go, oh wow, that makes perfect sense. And then a rising tide lifts all boats, and we start to get better as an organization, and we distance ourselves from our competition. And it's actually that simple.
Yeah. A great example. And I think, for example, in our organization, we have actually noticed the same thing, that a lot of clients are actually like super interested in like who are the people that they will be working with. And for example, what we have started to do is that, of course, like try to participate at many experts on the like sales phase as possible. But then at the same time, if you are in like service business, and your expert should be also doing work for the client, so they cannot be like everyone participating in all the sales cases. But what we have found out, for example, that scales very well, takes not that much time, is, for example, every time we are sending an offer, I'm asking some of the potential team members to do short, like 2-minute video introduction for the team, like, hey, here I am, this is why I would love to work with you. It takes so little time, and there's kind of the wow effect. It's on the feeling that, hey, wow, they did a video for us. It's like surprising how video can still be super wow effective these days.
What it says is like they care. And they took the time to personalize it, and now we can put a face to the name and all of those other things. So it's subtle, but it's actually really, really powerful. And I think that's one of the most important things for the next few years that businesses need to start thinking about. Customers hate automation, right? Because it doesn't benefit them at all. It's great for vendors, but it's not good for customers. So do the opposite. Tailor things, personalize them, make them much more relevant, include a little bit more surprise and delight, go the extra mile, and the customers will reciprocate. They'll be like, yeah, we definitely want to work with those guys, because there's so much, even though from a product or a pricing perspective, you might be the same, you might be worse, you might be more expensive. It's almost irrelevant, because they're like, these are the people we want to work with. They get us, they understand us, there's a strong cultural fit, we can see ourselves working with them, they understand us better, and they'll manage our risk better. All of these things influence them to make a buying decision in our favor.
Yeah, exactly. But then on the other side, I think there was some great examples on things that is working and we can be scaling. And then when we are thinking about the losing side, of course, I think the same examples might go here. The customer is saying that, hey, we didn't get to know your experts, and that's like super important for us. But what do you think? What are the typical ones that you have came across on the losing side, and how to change this?
There's some pretty bad ones, Sammy, if I'm honest. We hear they were really unprofessional. We hear they were unethical. We hear they pushed us way too hard and we lost trust in them. We hear those kind of things a lot. We also hear their proposal and bid documents were crap. Their demo was appalling. They they just did a show up and throw up. They didn't take any time to personalize it. They didn't understand who we were. They didn't listen. All they wanted to do was talk about it. So we hear some really, really bad stuff. But even if you park the bad stuff and you say, okay, let's assume that we're a pretty good organization, we do the right things. Customers are judging us all the way through a sales cycle. So if we're not responsive enough, if we don't appear like we're properly joined up, so our marketing to our sales to our pre-sales, to our value engineering, to our commercials, to our legals, if it's hard to buy from us, that becomes an issue in customers' eyes as well. If we're not as responsive as we should be, I think I said that, all of these things can because you're not 50% better or 50% worse than your competition. There's these little increments of 1%, 2% here and here, all the way through the sales engagement that we just sort of judge as we go through. So we see a lot of situations where vendors are busy. And because they're busy, they're doing lots of bids and proposals and tenders. They're not doing a very good job on the ones that they're doing. People are kind of throwing it together at night or on the weekends because they're busy doing consulting during the day, for example. And then somebody puts this whole document together and it looks like Frankenstein's bride. And then it gets thrown over to the customer. And the customer is like, this is their first impression. And they're like, this looks really bad. We see that happening all the time. Even for very large, very strategic companies that should know better, things are falling through the cracks. So that's one of the conversations. It's around how do we determine which bids we're going to pursue, and then how do we pursue them really well, and how do we qualify out of more, or at least put more responsibility back on the customer to say we need more information. So that's a big one, is the bid no bid process. Also, the quality of our discovery at the front end and our bid management all the way through is really, really critical as well. So yeah, we've seen some terrible examples of huge multi-million-dollar deals being lost because of really quite basic errors, because customers will judge you accordingly.
Yeah, that's exactly that one. I think, like, in order to be great in sales, it's not anything special. It's just doing the basic things in a good way, and I think you come a long way from that one. And earlier you also mentioned that, like, these win and lose analysis, they can help you. For example, if you want to do some strategic changes on your company. But I think, like, one thing for sales leaders that where you can really use this is that, like, when for example you are having conversation with your sales team and you are discussing with them that, hey, here is what I think, that if you do this you will be better, and if you do this you will be better, and then they are like, well, yeah, maybe. But if you can show, like, hey, here is like 3 customer cases, and all of these 3 said that, hey, you won because of this. Do this more often. And if all of these are saying that, hey, this is the reason why you lose, then they will take it more seriously for sure.
Big time. That's one of the things we see. As soon as it's the voice of the customer, not only do the senior leaders in the business sit up and pay attention, everybody in the business sits up and pays attention, because we all know how valuable it is to get this sort of feedback. So the other thing it does is, let's say you're getting feedback about the quality of your bids, for example, or your demos, or your proposals. Then you know where to focus your energy. Because I'll often get a phone call, someone say, oh, can you come in and do, I don't know, let's say negotiation training. I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Do you need that? And they're like, I don't know, but we've got budget and we need to spend the budget this quarter. So there's all of these businesses that are spending money on training their people, but they don't know if they're training them for the right things or not. So you can train all your people in negotiation. Is that going to move the needle? No, because the problem is actually in a completely different area, but you haven't identified where the problem is, so you don't know where to focus. So that's one of the most critical things. It's before we start trying to fix things, let's actually work out what's broken. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to talk to our customers, because they'll tell us.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Of course, like one of the easiest thing to do, as you mentioned, is to, like, talk with the client. But one thing that I would love to ask is that, like, now when technology is coming on everything you are doing, and there are, like, a lot of tools coming in. For example, I think for sales team, I'm actually having a demo today with Gong to, like, figure out, like, what kind of tool that one is. But is there some kind of, like, technology in place for basically automating everything that we have talked here today? Do we need people like you and me to ask the questions, or?
No, we don't. And it's really funny you should ask that question, Sammy, because for the last 10 years, I have a consulting team, and they do these interviews for big, strategic deals where the client's happy to pay for the interview because it makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily work well for smaller deals, but we still need that feedback. So how do we get it? So I've spent the last 12 months with a team of developers building an application which plugs into people's CRM systems, where you hit a button and say, we want to interview this customer, we want to, these 3 people, and it goes away and does that all effectively automatically and brings all the data back into your CRM system. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We can do it in different ways. We can automate aspects of the capture process, so long as it's still respectful of the customer. And it's not just saying, we're forcing you to answer these questions in this way. So we're still giving them the chance to record audio, record video, have a conversation, have a dialogue, but we're doing it in a way that's much more cost effective for a vendor, but also allows us to scale it out and get way more feedback. So yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah. Great to hear that there are tools like that, and for sure, like when you are selling a lot of cases, maybe smaller cases, then it's just not, numbers won't just work when you are like, if you are buying the interviews like from people and
Correct.
so on. Yeah. But hey, then in the end of every interview, I have a question from my previous guest to you, and then you have a chance to ask a question for my next guest. And my previous guest was Kaylee Edmondson, and Kaylee is actually working on marketing side. And maybe just to share a bit more before the question is the fact that Kaylee mentioned that there is a lot of marketers out there who are making some kind of public mistake, sending an email to hold a database with some false information or something like that. And Kaylee wanted to ask, like, what is your biggest public mistake that you have ever done?
So I had one particular experience, which in the end, it didn't go too badly, but it could have gone really, really badly. This was early. So I run my own business. It's a small business. And so we look for, ways to get publicity. So whether it's in the media or, partnerships or podcasts or all these kind of things. And so in the early days, I was talking to someone from Sky News, which is, the big news network over here. And I went for a conversation at Sky News, which I thought was going to be about the potential to have an interview in the future. And then they brought me into the studio with the presenter and the news, and I didn't know what was happening. And so I asked, what are we doing? And they said, well, we're going to do an interview with you now live on TV. And I was like, oh, God, I had no idea. And then it was like 12 or 13 minutes, it was a live interview. And all I was able to do was say, what are we talking about? And where should I look? And that was it. That was all I got to do. And then it was this whole conversation about, sales and business and how things were evolving. So in the end, it turned out okay. But like my whole body was like almost like frozen rigid with fear, because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't prepared for it. And so I think the lesson that I took away from that is like double and triple check before you put yourself in a situation, because you could find that it's a completely different situation and you could crash and burn. So like people who knew me probably would look at that and they're like, you look really weird. And I'm like, because I was paralyzed with fear, but I still managed to speak. So that was helpful. So yeah, I don't know if that answers Katie's question.
That's a nice story. But hey, then lastly, my next guest will be April Dunford. April has wrote a book about positioning, is talking a lot about positioning, and that will be the subject that we are talking with April. So what should I ask from April? It can be about positioning, it can be about anything else.
I think one question I'd be fascinated to hear April's feedback on would be, lots of startups and SaaS businesses, they start off selling their product to to SMEs or to mid-market, and then they try and push up to enterprise at a certain point in their maturity. So I'm just interested, how do you, if your product doesn't change, how do you change the positioning for your product to a completely different market or a completely different persona? I'm just fascinated by how companies struggle to change their positioning in that way.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will be asking that one from April on the next episode. But hey, at this point, big thanks for joining in. Thank you for everyone listening. And if you haven't already, now it's perfect time to call your client or ask someone to call them and ask, why did I win or why did I lose, and take that one to action. Thank
Yeah,
you for
that's couldn't have said it better than that, Sammy.
thanks and bye bye.
Cheers, all the best.